Our story begins in the year 1345 in the city of Fez, in the Maghreb region of the Muslim world, situated in present-day Morocco. A young man named Ibn Battuta was preparing for his journey to Mecca. He had everything ready for the long trip ahead. He made sure to bring enough provisions and water for his journey, and he prepared a staff to aid him in mounting his camel. After all, he would be traveling on the back of one for most of the way. Ibn Battuta had traveled extensively throughout the Muslim world, having visited many lands and cities, but this would be his longest journey yet. So when the time was right, he mounted his camel and began the trek across the Sahara Desert. The first leg of his journey was the hardest, crossing the unforgiving desert sands with little shade anywhere. But eventually the landscape began to change and the greenery of the Atlas Mountains came into view. As Ibn Battuta approached them, he could see that they were truly a majestic sight. In fact, they were so tall that he felt that if the tops were shaved off, the clouds would touch the ground. Once over the mountains, though, there was a slight respite from the harsh sun as he continued his pilgrimage south to the great city of Timbuktu. By now, the end of the journey was starting to feel like a distant dream, but at least the scenery was changing. Instead of sand dunes, he was passing through savannas, which were great for hunting. While he didn't want to disturb the local wildlife, it was also hard not to notice all the elephants roaming around, some with tusks as large as a man's arm. In the distance, though, Ibn Battuta finally spotted signs of human civilization. There was a river, trees, and lush vegetation, and best of all, people. After 2 months of seeing nothing but sand and animals, he was overjoyed. And as he entered Timbuktu, he was even more amazed. Great buildings crowded the streets, and they were built from baked brick and decorated with wood. Others were constructed entirely out of gold and ivory, while still others were made of precious stones and colorful glass. It was quite the spectacle. He learned that Timbuktu was famous for its scholars and libraries, which contained many valuable texts. There were also beautiful mosques and gardens, as well as a massive palace for the king. The city was so opulent that it felt like a palace itself. So after resting up, Ibn Battuta continued on his way, heading deeper into the heart of Africa. Traveling wasn't easy, though. Sometimes he would have to walk behind his camel when it got stuck in the mud. Sometimes he would get sick from drinking stagnant water, causing him to be bedridden for days. And other times the weather would take a turn, and he would get caught in flash floods. But slowly he continued his trek south toward the equator, passing through grasslands, forests, swamps, mountains, rivers, and even cataracts, until finally, after 4 months, he arrived at the Indian Ocean. After crossing the equator, he had reached the tropical regions of Africa, and he was blown away by what he saw. Huge trees grew everywhere, taller than any he had seen before. Some stretched so high that they touched the clouds. And because of how moist the air was, the trunks had strange growths on them that looked like warts. These trees also had thick vines hanging from their branches that looked like knotted ropes. The undergrowth was dense and almost impenetrable, but birds of all colors flew in and out of it constantly. Some of the birds Ibn Battuta saw were so brightly colored that they looked painted. Others were huge, with some being white and others resembling falcons. But none were as strange as the bird that looked like a dog that walked on 2 legs. Once Ibn Battuta got closer, he realized it was just a monkey holding a fish in its hand. He found this comical and decided to keep walking toward the coast until finally he could hear the waves crashing. And when he emerged from the trees, he saw an unbelievable sight before him. Stretching as far as the eye could see was the vast blue ocean. Having never seen anything like this before, he marveled at the waves crashing on the shore. In fact, it reminded him of a mighty river, except this was much bigger, and its waters never seemed to stop. He stood on the beach for hours, watching the boats sail back and forth. Some were small, others were large, and some were transporting goods, and others had people on board. But there was one thing that confused him. He knew that the sailors were going east, but he couldn't understand why they were sailing into the sunset. He asked one of the sailors about this, and the man told him they were headed to India. This made no sense to him, as he thought the sailors must be crazy. How could anyone sail into the direction of the sunset? The sailor just smiled and said, "There is no sunset in the sea," then invited him aboard for a ride. So Ibn Battuta left his camel behind and boarded the ship as they set sail for India. After a few weeks, they encountered another vessel, and when the men on board saw the strange-looking travelers, they asked where they were from. When they heard the men were Europeans, they asked if the rumors were true that their king was planning to attack the Muslims. To their surprise, they learned that it was actually the other way around. The European king wanted to convert the Muslims to Christianity. But the sailors claimed this was untrue, and that their king was actually quite fond of the Muslims and appreciated their knowledge and trade. At this point, Ibn Battuta was getting tired of hearing about European Christians. For the past few years, he had been traveling through Christian lands, and while some of them were nice places, he'd found the kings and princes of Europe to be ignorant and jealous of Islam. They loved to boast about their strength and always bragged about how many people they had conquered or killed. They did not care about knowledge or wisdom and only cared about money and power. They also considered themselves superior because they were white while insulting others who weren't. They called non-Europeans swarthy and said they were cursed by God, which caused many of them to be evil. To Ibn Battuta, these European Christians sounded like hypocrites who liked to think they were better than everyone else. As the voyage continued, the ships passed through areas with calm waters, and Ibn Battuta learned that the Indian Ocean was much different than any sea he had ever seen. Some parts were very rough and dangerous, while others were smooth and relaxing. One day the winds changed directions, and the calm ocean became stormy. The waves rose higher and higher until the ship was tossed about like a leaf in the wind. Ibn Battuta was seasick and worried that the ship would capsize, but thankfully it did not. When the weather cleared up, Ibn Battuta noticed something unusual. The sky was filled with stars, and it looked like a path had been created in the heavens. Amazed by this, he consulted an astrologer who told him that this was the Milky Way. The man pointed out that it was the holiest of places in the sky, and that all roads led to it. This made Ibn Battuta think of the similarities between the Muslim and Christian beliefs, as both religions believed in the same God, just different prophets. Eventually, the ships reached a port, and Ibn Battuta decided to disembark. He'd seen enough of the ocean and was eager to continue his journey. Though he was disappointed that he would not be able to visit Mecca, at least he got to see the vastness of the Indian Ocean and learn about the stars from the astrologers. He then crossed the Arabian Sea to India, where he explored the magnificent mosques, bustling marketplaces, and beautiful palaces. He marveled at the spice markets, vibrant fabrics, and delicious foods. And he was particularly impressed by the ancient Hindu temples and impressive feats of engineering. After spending several months in India, Ibn Battuta continued his travels eastward, visiting Thailand, China, and the Malay Peninsula. Everywhere he went, he marveled at the different cultures, customs, and traditions. He was fascinated by the Chinese art and architecture, and was impressed by the grandeur of the Thai kingdoms. He also learned about the diverse peoples and religions of the Malay Peninsula, and was captivated by the beauty of the region. Finally, after years of travel, Ibn Battuta returned home to Fez feeling enriched by the experiences and knowledge he had gained along the way. His journey had taken him to the farthest reaches of the known world, and he had seen things that few others could claim to have seen. And that's the end of our video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button below and share it with your friends. You can also subscribe to be notified of our next video. Thank you for watching.